I'm imagining somebody sliding this filing across the table or sending it to us in an email and saying, "What do you think?"
Disgusting, despicable, a huge mistake.
You're asking me to believe that a company this size had no idea what was in that filing.
Glass was literally raining onto the streets from buildings that were damaged, multiple deaths, and as of this recording, there are still thousands of people without power.
I think the lesson there, again, is apologize, clarify, take responsibility. Then you can see what else you need to do.
Thanks for tuning in to Keep It Legal, the show where we break down concepts, litigation, and current events with our legal experts. I'm your host, Mark Anik, and I'm with Androvett, a full-service marketing and public relations firm serving lawyers, law firms, and many others. Joining us today, once again, are our Senior Director of Public Relations from our Houston office, April Cadena. April, hi.
Hi, happy to be here.
Lovely to have you along with our crew. Our Director of Public Relations, Barry Pound, here in our Dallas office.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, Barry. And our podcast producer and digital PR manager, Alyssa Wolf.
Hello.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So here's how we end up around the table once again. We gathered here a couple of weeks ago to talk about all things crisis communications, or at least to kick off the discussion about all things crisis communications. And almost as soon as we hit the stop button on that podcast, we found some other things going on in the news, and we all looked at each other and said, okay, that would make a really good topic for another crisis communications discussion. So here we go. First up is American Airlines. Last year, we heard about a lawsuit filed by parents of a 9-year-old girl who was recorded on video while she was using the bathroom on an American Airlines flight. I've got the story from the Dallas Morning News up on the commuter monitor here, and it has that awful photograph that somebody shot of the commode with the iPhone taped to the back of the seat. And we all saw that in the newspaper and went, oh my gosh, right?
Awful, awful.
Authorities have arrested a now former flight attendant who faces several federal charges in the case. So we knew about all of that. And then last week, the airline filed an answer to the family's lawsuit in the case. And it includes a number of defenses. And one of the defenses says this, that the defendant, in this case American, would show that any injuries or illnesses alleged to have been sustained by plaintiff Mary Doe, the 9-year-old girl, were proximately caused by plaintiff's own fault and negligence. Caused by the 9-year-old's fault and negligence, were also proximately caused by plaintiff's use of the compromised lavatory, interesting term, which she knew or should have known contained a visible and illuminated recording device. So before we go any further, Alyssa's shaking her head over there. You're a woman, of course. You're also a mom. I want everybody's reaction to just the notion of the airline blaming the 9-year-old girl.
Yeah, I mean, it's disgusting, despicable, a huge mistake from a PR standpoint, as we saw with the following coverage of that response. It's just sickening. I mean, no person could really consciously believe that it could be the 9-year-old's fault in any way. It's crazy. And to come out and say that publicly, I mean, that really made the situation for them much worse, like we referenced in the first episode.
I remember we were sitting in a meeting the morning after this story broke. Barry, you knew about it. I didn't know about it until you started talking about it. And my reaction was exactly yours. It was, they did what? And we do public relations and marketing for lawyers and law firms. So I'm imagining somebody sliding this filing across the table or sending it to us in an email and saying, what do you think?
They should have done that because we would have definitely advised that they removed this victim-blaming language from the filing.
But did anybody read it? Who read it? And how did that get through?
That's probably the seminal question in all of this, right? Who read it? Did anybody read it? There's an above the law piece on it today, and we'll get to more of this in a moment. But the reporter there asks the same thing. Quote, and not for nothing, but what client lets a consequential filing go out the door without least reading it? Okay, so that all happened. We all got upset. We thought it was crazy. American very shortly had to come out after that and say the filing was an error. Very strong enough response?
No, I don't think so. And again, what bothers me about that response is American never really took any responsibility for it. They made their law firm the scapegoat for it, and consequently, they took an already high-profile case and made it even more high-profile. Had they come out more forthrightly and said, beyond the, this doesn't reflect our values and so forth, take responsibility for it, apologize for it, and do it perhaps even something beyond a statement that you issue. I mean, get the CEO out there, get someone out there to put a face to this and say, this is bad and this is wrong and we apologize.
I wrote down as I was thinking about this, the thing that all of us always tell companies and lawyers when they're in this position is, okay, you've had a bad thing happen. And that's not going away. PR is not going to get rid of that. But now the question is, what can you do to avoid making it worse than it already is? In April, it occurs to me, they did exactly that. Their approach made it worse than it already was, as if a secret recording of a 9-year-old girl going to the restroom is not bad enough.
Well, and you're asking me to believe that a company this size had no idea what was in that filing. That does not make you look better. It absolutely does not. In what universe did we think that this was going to make it okay?
And as Barry points out, they've been more than willing to make their AmLaw 100 law firm the scapegoat in all of this. And that firm is being very, very quiet. It makes you wonder what's being exchanged there in emails and discussions. But clearly somebody dropped the ball here.
And in truth, we don't know internally what they have done from the standpoint of discipline or changing of processes and so forth as a result. You would hope something, and that are just reluctant at this point to say what those things are.
Above the Law also asks a fundamental question. Why is this a lawsuit in the first place? Parents come to you and say, our 9-year-old girl was secretly recorded. Mm-hmm. There are federal charges. Why is there not somebody at the company saying, let's sit down at a table and have a conversation?
Well, and maybe this is a question for a lawyer, but does the additional coverage of the horrible response, does this warrant additional claims in the family's suit? More mental anguish, kind of, claims along those lines?
Perhaps the parents and maybe even the young lady had to see the news coverage in which she was being blamed for having been recorded. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine what that would do to someone who may be 9 or at most 10 years old now, because we're talking about somebody who was recorded last year. Interesting, terrible case, almost a textbook response of how not to handle something when something bad happens. Okay, item number 2. We had some very, very bad weather in Houston, Texas. April, a couple of weeks ago, 10 days ago?
Yeah, May 16th.
Okay. Alyssa, do you have the background on that?
Yeah, I do. So basically, in Houston, a major storm came through that devastated the city. Multiple electricity transmission towers collapsed. 2 tornadoes were reported in the area. Over 900,000 customers were left without power. Glass was literally raining onto the streets from buildings that were damaged. Multiple deaths. And as of this recording, there are still thousands of people without power from the storm that kind of caused this whole thing. I know we've had some weather in between now and then, but that alone is a crisis in itself, right? And then the reaction, as we saw, again, have potentially made it worse. And April, as someone who lives in the area, you can probably speak to that a little further.
Well, I mean, it definitely was a scary time, obviously, the day that it happened. And to see that many people without power that quickly felt very, tropical storm, hurricane. And usually it's more of an extended period, but this was so fast. And it was just kind of a shock because we've never in my lifetime have experienced anything like this. The derecho is what it's called. And it felt like a hurricane and it looked like a hurricane had hit downtown Houston. So 5 days later, still hundreds of thousands of people are still without power. And people are frustrated. They're hot. It's 90 degrees. It's already hot in Houston. And KPRC does this one-on-one interview with the representative from CenterPoint Energy. Valid. You would expect something like that, 5 days after this massive storm. And the interview seems relatively normal, something that you would expect to happen. The reporter, Bill Spencer, asks a couple of questions. It's normal. And then things took a turn when he started to ask the CenterPoint representative about CenterPoint's communication with the city and with the media, and things really got contentious.
Okay, CenterPoint Energy, you have 9,000 employees. You're a $38 billion company, and you service 5 or 6 different states across the country. And yet, this massive disaster hit us Thursday night. Why did you not set up a media center, a storm center, where you would have a media person able to talk to us every hour, on the hour, throughout this entire disaster? That is an industry standard. That's what they do in Detroit, New York, Miami, Chicago. They provide, the power company, the primary power company provides a media center so that you guys are accessible to us. You never did that. You still have not done that. Instead, you're putting your information online. Why have you not set up a media center, and will you set one up now that I am telling you we need one?
So the reason we haven't set up a media center is the reason that I'm not here with you today. It's because all of our teams have been focused on getting people restored. And that is an all hands on deck operation. CenterPoint may have over 9,000 employees, but I will share with you personally, our communications department is a tight-knit, hardworking group. And so we are the people that are responsible for the press releases. We are the people that are responsible for communicating on social media. We are the people that are responsible for updating the website. And we're also the people that are responsible for communicating with the community and with the media. And so honestly, it has been a lot of work for us.
How many people on your media team? How many people do you have?
How many people do we have total on our staff?
On your media team?
It would depend on how you count our media team. The communications department as a whole has people that can pitch in different aspects, but right now in Houston on our external communications team, it is me and one other person.
Okay, so not good, April?
Not good. And I feel for her. In just
Me
watching,
too.
I was surprised because in these situations, I've been on both sides, right? I've worked in the media, I've been on that side, and obviously now doing this for our clients, you want to be ready. So I was really surprised to see that she was not prepared to answer that question. In a newsroom, and you all have experienced it for those who have been in Alyssa and Mark have been in a newsroom. You're going to be inundated with calls from people who want to know why their electricity isn't on. And they can't understand why their neighbor has it. They don't. They just can't get it. And so I'm sure this question comes from that place. So it was surprising to me that she wasn't ready for it. I would expect to see a question like, do you have power? Be prepared for those kinds of questions. So to see that, it was hard to watch.
I'm with you. I want to be careful because this woman is doing a very difficult, thankless
Absolutely.
job. If you sign on to do PR for the power company,
Oh, yeah.
we all hate you from the get-go, right?
Well, you're
Because-
never going to people with good news.
No, No, and we don't like you because we have to pay for electricity. We think, somehow it should be free, right? And then when it goes out, we're really upset that it's out. And Bill Spencer, the reporter, is clearly upset that it's out and that he can't get the answers. Barry, if you get this question from Bill Spencer, why is there not a media center set up out here? What's your response?
Bill, that's a great idea and one that we will certainly look at implementing.
And what then happens if that's the response? I, as the reporter now, I kind of go, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And it kind of heads off the rest of this discussion, which, again, she's doing her level best. But, when you talk about all of the different jobs that you're doing in the communications apparatus, if I don't have power right now, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, it's a little bit like she's going to her boss complaining for the lack of resources.
And then
that's not what the customer wants to hear in
No.
that situation.
And then when you get the question about how many people, if the answer is only 2, please don't say that live on television.
I thought she was fine to say tight-knit, hardworking group.
Yeah, she should have stopped right
Period.
there.
Done. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think to add to what Barry said, even if it's something like, you know what, we're heading into hurricane season, you better believe we're going to be ready. Something like that, at least to let people know you don't have to worry. But she started to sound defensive and frustrated that she was getting those questions. And nobody's more frustrated than people who haven't had power for 5 days.
And I think the cardinal sin here, April, you alluded to it earlier, is when you're going to be talking to reporters, please don't do that without proper preparation. We always tell our clients, well, if you stop to think for a moment about the top 5 or 6 questions you're going to get, you can tell, man, the way Bill loads up that question, man, she's about to get it with both guns. And you're just hoping and praying that she's prepared for it, and it feels like nobody prepared her for it. And April, to your point, hopefully they can do a little bit of that work between now and hurricane season, which starts in very short order.
Well, and you also said, Mark, I mean, this interview was a long interview, and she did really well as
She comes
things
back rather
progressed.
strong. Yeah.
Yeah, she absolutely did. But I mean, unfortunately, not everybody's going to stay to watch the end. So it was a little painful for her to have to go through that.
Okay, last story for the day. Scottie Scheffler, the #1 golfer in the world, taking part in the PGA Championship in Kentucky last week, on his way to the golf course for round 2. And lo and behold, what does he find but the scene of a horrible and tragic traffic accident where someone has been killed, I believe hit by a bus out in front of the country club. And I don't know the details of that, so my condolences to that individual and the family, because I think that gets lost in the story about what happened next. And what happened next is there was some sort of confrontation, some sort of interaction between Scheffler and a local police officer, and Scheffler, ends up getting arrested and taken to jail, and he ends up, as somebody pointed out, in the same day, pictured in an orange jail jumpsuit and in a golf shirt back on the golf course. Barry, if I called you and I said, hey, we're working for Scottie Scheffler today, he had some sort of run-in with the cops, and he got arrested, and they said he didn't follow their directions, there was some sort of incident, what's a boilerplate statement that we could give Mr. Scheffler or his lawyer to use on his behalf?
I apologize for the confrontation that I had with the police officer. I have the utmost respect for those men and women who serve in law enforcement, and I am sorry that this misunderstanding was just enhanced by my reaction and the reaction of the officer.
Here at Androvett, we like to refer to Barry and his office as statements are us. and you all have just experienced why that is. But he included a couple of very important things. Nice job there. There's an apology in there. There's the statement of, hey, this isn't a violation of law. This is a misunderstanding. I'm certain if we can get everybody in a room, all of this can get straightened out. And that's somewhat what happened, because just before we sat down to record this episode of the program, this headline, charges against world's top golfer Scottie Scheffler, dropped after arrest outside the PGA Championship. So the authorities there, the county attorneys, looked at the case and said it doesn't appear that there were any criminal offenses here. And Scheffler released a statement. He must be reading Barry's email. He released a statement saying, I've got it right here, I wish to put this incident behind me, and I hope the officer will do the same. Police officers have a difficult job, and I hold them in high regard. Now, do we think Scottie Scheffler pulled out his scorecard and wrote that on the back of it?
No.
I think Barry wrote it.
Do you think Barry wrote? Do you think he's been working for
Maybe.
Scheffler on the
I
side?
think he
No,
is.
no. But again, from the time this happened, it seems to me, from what I followed it, Scheffler and his counsel have done and said the right things at the right time. And I think the lesson there, again, is apologize, clarify, take responsibility. Then you can see what else you need to do. Let the process play out, but that's got to be your first instinct. And in this case, it seemed to be like it was.
I thought from the moment it happened, to your point, that he and his attorney did a fairly decent job of responding without committing anything that would create a problem for them legally, but also without saying anything that raised the temperature on the pot
Yeah,
that was
there was-
already boiling.
Yeah, and I never saw or heard anything that he was defensive, that he was trying to justify his actions. And then again, he didn't have to, because he had already taken responsibility and moved on.
And he ended up finishing not first, but I think 8th in the PGA Championship. And I think the paycheck for 8th place is about $500,000. So all in all, not a bad weekend for Mr. Scheffler.
Well, it could have been better
Could have been better.
in many ways, but
Could have been much better.
could have been much worse.
Well, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you, all of you. I appreciate the discussion. It's always fascinating to sit down and look at some of these things and play the what if game and figure out, how we might do these, how you might do them better. So thank you. I appreciate the input.
Absolutely.
And thank you for tuning into Keep It Legal. Make sure to like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and tune in next time. Until then, I'm your host, Mark Anik. We'll see you then.